So just, while we're waiting for any latecomers to skid in, why am I thinking of Terang? We'll see. Um, what I thought we'd do tonight. It'd be nice to just, spend a couple of minutes telling each other little stories about the weekend and things just to warm up. I got started with that with Galina. And then I think what I would like to do is, as I proposed, that we just have a lean coffee. And if Shane, Galina, you're not familiar with lean coffee, I can walk you through what that is.
Please do.
But the theme is going to be basically, look, we're all getting vaccinated, if not already, then soon. What's changed for you? So for any of us who are sort of from the agile community, it would be like a combined retrospective and backlog grooming for what's next in your life. So, I see John is joining us. He's still connecting to audio. So we'll give him a minute to join us. So, and I may have to repeat myself as other people join. Lean coffee. Lean coffee is an agendaless meeting format. And I'll share a mural board with you, and we can spend a minute or two just figuring out how that works. But on the mural board, which works like an online whiteboard, what we'll do is spend a few minutes thinking of things that we would like to talk about and posting those. And then we'll spend a couple of minutes just voting, because it may be that somebody else's topic is actually more interesting to you than the topic you thought of. Maybe not. And then whatever gets the largest number of votes, we start with that and we talk about it for a few minutes. And then when that time is expired, we vote to see whether we want to talk about it for a bit longer. And when that time is expired, we vote to see whether we want to talk about it for a bit longer. And when we don't, we move on to the next one. And it's a very easy format for making sure that people are talking about what's important to them right now. Well, there's Pavit joining us. Very good. I think she's familiar with lean coffee. So I'm going to get us underway just by telling you a story that is kind of about my weekend, but will also have you understand why it was that I was kind of keen to have this as a topic. And then I'd like other people just to say a little hello. And there's John. I can see John now. He's on. Very good. Hello. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. So we can just spend a few minutes, warming our vocal cords up. So this was not last weekend. This was actually the weekend before. And that was the very first weekend where both myself and my wife were fully vaccinated. We were more than 2 weeks past our second vaccine. And we felt that we could venture out into the wider world. And that Friday, April the 30th, was my 61st birthday. I'd missed my 60th. Thank you. Yes, very good. And I hoped originally to have quite a big birthday on my 60th, but inconveniently somebody scheduled a pandemic right over the top of it. So inconsiderate. So that got deferred. And our anniversary is 5 days before my birthday. So we always try and do a little bit of a something that's going to be a bit of fun. And what we did is jump in the car. We live in the San Francisco East Bay. And we drove up to Petaluma in the North Bay to have lunch there. And we realized that both of us had left our hats behind. So we went hat shopping. That was very nice. And then we drove on up to a tiny little 2-horse town called Occidental and checked into the most gorgeous bed and breakfast, this beautiful, rambling, great place. Went for a quick walk on the Bodega Headlands, which was blowy and cold, but very spectacular. And then the next day, got up, had a nice breakfast. And then we went across to the Ramani Buffalo Mozzarella Creamery. North Bay is famous for its wine tours, but neither of us are really wine buffs. We both like cheese. And when we found out that there are cheese tours, we were like, yeah, all in, we'll do that. And this Ramani Buffalo Mozzarella Creamery was the only one that had one at a convenient time for us that, we could book into without waiting months. So that was the one that we went to. And we turned up and it was this little property. It was couple of barns surrounded by meadows with buffalo in them and some sheep. That was somebody else's property. And the owner turned up, and it was very blowy again, so we had to go inside. We went into the milking parlor for her to, she was going to explain the history of the place and what to expect from our time there. And it was absolutely fascinating. So I'm a sort of enterprise agile coach in recovery. I think a great deal about how work works and how people work and all of that. And I was, as ever, listening with those ears. And so she explained how she and her husband, she had been an architect and he'd been a software engineer in Silicon Valley. And they both kind of burnt out, him in particular. And he quit his job and he went through a big exercise on a whiteboard with stickies, bless him, writing up everything that he thought about that was important to him, that was a self-expression, and then condensed it and condensed it and condensed it down to just 5 factors. And if they could find something to do that hit all 5 of these factors, that was what his life was going to be next. And they included things like it had to be outdoors, it had to include food, it had to be unique, a couple of other factors. And eventually they worked out that cheese making was going to be the thing. And for it to be truly unique, buffalo. So they looked into this because they both traveled enormous amounts and they'd spent time in Italy and were familiar with buffalo mozzarella and knew that most mozzarella in North America was fake cow mozzarella. It's not real water buffalo mozzarella. So they had a look around and they couldn't find anybody who'd ever managed to get it right in North America. Quite a few had tried. And it turned out that actually it was clearly not an easy undertaking because people had been hurt, even killed, trying to do this. I mean, these are water buffalo, right? You mess with a water buffalo, doesn't go well. So they were like, well, there's nobody that we can actually sort of model ourselves on. There's plenty of people we can learn from failure. They found one herd over in Florida, where this guy had started quite a large, but essentially wild herd that he was using to graze and clear swampland. And they got 5 buffalo from him, essentially wild. And so they had to spend the first year just domesticating these buffalo. And they did a lot of research during that year to find out why it was that other people had failed. And it turned out that the simplest and shortest explanation of it is that other people were treating buffalo just like they were cows. Well, cows have been domesticated for thousands of generations. Buffalo, not so much. And they really saw this when they gained the trust of these buffalo, and the buffalo had started breeding, which was good because now they were going to give milk. And they actually brought them into the milking parlor and tried to line them up. Well, you know how you line cows up side by side? Doesn't work with buffalo. Because here's the thing. Buffalo are a prey species. And prey species are at their most vulnerable when they're feeding their young. So they have to feel completely safe when feeding, literally to be able to feed. And the way how that works with buffalo, in fact, with almost any species, is that when the mom can actually be with the young and they're both feeling safe and there they are aware of each other, there's a big oxytocin release, a big hormonal release, which is what triggers the milk. So if they're not feeling safe, no milk. So what they did was rearrange the inside of the milking parlor so that these buffalo could stand head to tail and could look across and see their babies who were tied up on one side. And they'd entice them in with what they called cookies, which was really molasses and oats. And the buffalo and the babies loved these. And they realized that, of course, what had failed was that all of the previous people trying had basically tried to bully the buffalo into behaving like cows. And what this couple had realized was that what they needed was milk from the buffalo so they could make an income from it. What the buffalo needed was good food, safety, and knowing that their babies were right there with them and safe. And while she was speaking, she was using language that would be familiar to us. She was like, well, we realized we couldn't use a push system. It would have to be a pull system. And we took a sort of lean startup approach to doing the least possible. And I was like, this is really interesting. These people have kind of discovered exactly what most of us agile coaches have discovered. That if you take care of people and explain to them what's important and why it's important and to whom, they will do a good job. It's that simple. The best bit of this whole session was that after this talk, she led us out and they'd separated the cows from their babies, water buffalo from their babies, the moms, because they'd learnt that really they needed to fall in love with the water buffalo and the water buffalo needed to fall in love with them. Lots of oxytocin. And part of how they encouraged buffalo to be happy around people was to have them around people. And they put us, the visitors, in with these little baby water buffalo. Now, by baby, I mean they're the size of a donkey, right? And they gave us a brush each and went, this is what you do. You brush these beautiful water buffalo. And they got these big boopable noses and these big eyes with these huge lashes. And you give them a brush. And if they like it, their tails go curly. And if they really like it, they fall down on the ground. And if they really like it, they roll on their back and present their tummy so you can scratch their tummy and give them a brush there. And if they really, really like it, they roll their heads back and they close their eyes and they go to sleep. And that's exactly what happened. And I have to say, weirdly, it had the most profound effect on me. And it had me coming back after that session really clear that moving out of the pandemic, whatever I was going to do, needed to be that clear and simple. I mean, I study all of these different theories of coaching, all of these theories of how organizations work, frameworks, psychological, sociological, anthropological frameworks, studies in trauma, all of this stuff. But it's all basically down to, if you take care of people, treat them well and let them know what's important, you'll be in good shape. And that's what's had me start to think about how I'm coming out of my pandemic. And that's what had me think that would be a really interesting topic for the evening. For us to all propose where we're, I don't know if we've got any ideas, where we're a bit stuck or where we're a bit apprehensive or what we just loved about the pandemic and we'd love to keep going or we hated and we want to see go away. So that's what had me going. So if anybody else has a nice story about the last couple of weekends, now's your chance to share it. And then once we've done that, then we can go ahead and actually propose a few topics and then get into having a little bit of a lean coffee. So over to you guys. Does anybody have a nice story they'd like to share?
Sure. My nice story is also potentially not necessarily a topic for lean coffee, but it is kind of a reach out to this group as well. But I have been working quite for quite a bit of time on building a program that is allowing people that come out of our Agile MBA Agile MBA class, and people that come out of that we were treating as having a silver bullet that they understood Scrum. This is very much not this case. Going through the class does not actually give you any experience in it, but to give practical experience and to also give people the support where they're in a place where they really need it. We built a program that basically forms Scrum teams out of job searchers and that are actively facilitated by Scrum Masters that serve as both Scrum Master and partial product owner, in that there's a unified backlog. And so we don't have both a product owner and a Scrum Master because we don't have enough roles, but that's purely built around job searching. And those user stories are purely built around the people that are looking for work. And any stories that they select as a team, everyone's working towards to be able to complete, even if it's Hui's story and Olaf's story and Andrew's story for a week, everyone's working on making sure that everyone advances the increment. And we're at an exciting point now where we have the support and everything built out, but we're looking for facilitators for running this next version of this session. So it doesn't have to be right now, but I wanted to put out to the group here, if they have the time from May 24th to July 12th or July 16th, I believe, to be able to commit 8 to 10 hours a week.
Can you put all of that into chat and your contact details?
And I don't think I've sent this to any of you in LinkedIn, but I've been sending this to quite a few people to reach out to them.
Okay.
Um,
So is that request clear to everybody? Is there anybody who's a little bit hazy about what the ask is?
I'm going to share this here, and this hopefully makes it more clear as well.
Yeah,
Very
and
good.
I'd post it in the Slack channel.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'll post in the Slack channel as well.
Yeah.
And if anybody, I should put an invite up for anybody who is not a Slack channel member as
16th.
well, because I'm not sure everybody is.
So it's coming up quickly, but we also have 4 Scrum Masters already, and they're pairing with one another on these teams. So we would have 2 teams so far. And if they didn't feel the need to pair, then they could be separate, and then we'd have 3 or 4 teams. But
there you go. So that's in chat for everybody, and I've just put in how to join the Slack channel.
Mm-hmm.
If some of you are not members, I think almost everybody here is. But good. So that's a nice thing for people to maybe get involved with, and look forward to, and pay it forward, and be a contribution.
And I mean, that relates partially to what you're saying about how to get out of the pandemic, because this is partly what I did to get into the pandemic. Was in February 2020, I was seeing how everything was going in Wuhan. I was seeing how everyone was locked in. I was seeing that a lot of people were going to need support through these next year and a half. And so I dug in not only on the Agile MBA, but also on building larger communal resources in that community.
Very good. I'm just having to restart my browser. It just suddenly lost all of the tabs for this evening. How rude. So while I'm doing that, if somebody else has any fun tales of the weekend or something, just, you're getting the theme, now's your chance to chip in.
So I'll jump in and share just to kind of get people thinking kind of what's been going on in my mind. I've been kind of a busy bee, almost to the point of like being a little bit overwhelmed. I mean, I am in between coaching courses, and I plan on some of you already know, I plan on continuing the program I was in, but also doing the coaching supervision that goes with it. I find COVID to be fairly interesting because we are about to emerge into a new world where not just ourselves learning to adapt to a new norm, but also I think there's also like a crisis with organizations and companies in which they already had trouble, like especially with who through the lens of who I'm employed by. There is this thing of it's like VUCA on steroids, right? I mean, it's like they need somebody to handhold them through the uncertainty. But none of us know what the uncertainty is at the same time, right? I mean, it's sort of like what's fascinating for me is after a Bay ALN meetup a couple years ago, some of you know I'm a big fan of strategic foresight. Like, how do I, and had we turned the clock back 2 years ago and done a strategic foresight, we would have said, hey, maybe you should anticipate a potential pandemic, that might affect your business, and then nobody would, it's like at that point, it would be like crying wolf, or, you're like Chicken Little, right?
Yeah.
And now they're going to listen, right? Because now the impossible has happened. And I think in a way, it's like you have these organizations, and not just organizations, but also individuals. Like for me, for instance, what the hell is coaching going to look like, right? When we come out of, whether it's agile coaching or professional coaching or whatnot, what the hell is this going to look like? Because we're going to be all remote. I mean, what's going through my mind is there going to be a wage depression? We're going to have to compete globally now. right? That you're starting to hear rumblings of it. Like we are increasingly competing in a national market now, right? Before we would compete in a local market. Like I'm in the Bay Area, and it's like the costs here are high, you know. But now, if I'm going to compete remotely, I'll be, you know, competing against a friend of mine in Omaha,
Yeah.
who has a fraction of the cost of where I am, right?
You know what, I'm going to interrupt you because this is actually sounding like exactly the kind of thing that's material for the evening.
That's right. So
yeah.
That's my I'm trying to kind of prime the pump for the lean coffee, right?
Yeah, you have perfectly.
It's sort of like, that's what I've been worried about.
Yeah.
That's why I've been kind of scrambling on courses and reading and hanging out with this August bunch, you know, and to anticipate what's next.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm curious what people are going through, because that's my weekend. My weekend is meditating so I can deal with that, you know, taking courses so I can deal with that, helping other people deal with that, you know.
Perfect. So I direct everybody's attention to chat. And there's a string of links gone in. The first one is to join Slack if you're not already a member for us and you'd like to be. The next one is for the mural that we're going to use tonight. And this is a visitor link. So you will come in, you can, I think you can change your name, but you would come into that as, something like, you know, visiting Armadillo or something peculiar. And then I see that Galena noticed that Edward's link had been truncated. And so that's the full link for Edward's thing. But I'd invite you all to click on the mural link. Now, give me a wave if people are not familiar with mural. Good, John, got it. Okay. So click on the link and get in there.
Yeah.
The short version of it is that it is an online whiteboard. And how it basically works, I've locked everything that's on there, so you won't be able to accidentally move it around. You can move things around to see where you are by clicking and dragging on the background. If you look down the bottom right, there's a zoom settings thing, which does exactly what it says. You can zoom in and out, either using the plus or minus with your mouse, or clicking on that hand and dragging things around with it. But what we're going to be doing is, if you just double click somewhere on the main canvas, it drops in a sticky, a post-it note for you. And so what I want people to do, people have already made a little bit of a start in this top left-hand area where it says proposed topics. We're going to spend a few minutes. I'll set a timer for, what do we think is a reasonable time? I'll say 5 minutes to get us started. And just if you can sort of summarize a little something that you'd like to talk about or hear about.
Give us a
Then I'll just a single line or so. And then once 5 minutes have passed, we'll see if people are still writing, if we need any longer. And if not, then we'll just go through what's up there in case people need to explain just a little bit. And I'll ask people to explain in one breath so that we can get a sense of what it is that they like to talk about. Then we'll vote. So I'm going to start the timer for 5 minutes now. So folks, go ahead, double click. You doing all right with this, John? You look like you're okay. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Got it. Anybody else struggling? Looks like you're all right. No, good.
Hmm.
I don't know who renamed visiting snail to visiting armadillo, but that's an extra 5 brownie points for that. Good job.
Bonus
But
point.
yes, by the way,
I'll
first
take
person,
the points.
you'll take those points. Really, very good. First person to 1,000,000 brownie points gets to go home early. Okay. Good. We're about halfway through. Got another couple of minutes. If it peters out before we get to 5 minutes, that's fine.
Wow, a lot of topics. You guys are awesome.
This is great. Yeah. Well, we won't get through all of these, but we might see some clustering.
We're gonna have to vote. Yeah.
Yeah. This could be one of those lean coffees where just the process of explaining what we mean consumes almost the entire conversation.
I'm going to unconnect that arrow for your benefit, Andrew, when you start dragging things around.
Okay.
Since we've learned how dangerous those connected nodes can be.
Yes, for those of you who weren't here the other week, we did a very large mural and something happened and this massive interconnected network just suddenly scrambled and looked like the kitten had pulled the knitting out of the basket. It was just a mess.
Which sounds a lot like a work environment, to be honest.
It was a lot, actually, yes. Yes, it was, complex and emergent, wasn't it? Suddenly stumbled into chaos.
Chaos suddenly.
Yeah. Gosh, there's some great questions in here. Good job, people. This is fantastic. We've got, another minute. If you've run out of ideas, have a look to see if there's stuff that you could sort of put together, because it actually seems like it's different versions of the same sort of thing.
Excuse me.
And as you're talking, for those that came late, we should re-explain what lean copy is. So we're gonna vote on these topics and speak at it in 5-minute increments. And after every 5 minutes, we're gonna do a quick thumbs up vote to see if we continue for another 5 minutes. And if everybody says no or is abstains, we'll move to the next topic.
Okay, so 10 seconds. And I think we're about there. And it's going to go ding at me in a second. Oh, very good. Yes, it did.
Cleared for boarding?
Yes, very good. I didn't know it was set to that. Very satisfying. So let's just have a little scan. Are there any sort of duplicates that we could put together? Sorry, yes, I don't think I can afford an island, but I like the idea. It's very good.
So the online world and community versus as online becomes more accessible, how we choose to connect, are those duplicate? Are they similar?
It's related, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Whoever it was posted those two. Would you both agree that those could be combined into a single conversation?
I posted both of them, and it feels like I'm kind of gravitating around an idea, but I haven't quite stuck the landing.
Okay, got it. Well, in that case, let's just go through these. As there's so many, what I'll do is read it. If anybody just doesn't understand what the question means, please, to your camera, give me a thumbs down or a wave or something to get my attention. So then we'll ask somebody to explain what they mean by the question in a single breath. So we're not here all night. So I'll start with the top left. Who in our community needs a leg up and how can we give it? That's easy, right? So now I'll be so scared to get another booster shot. Right? Do you need to have that explained, Edward?
I am a little bit curious, yes.
Right.
A lot of people have some side effects. When I was this was mine on a day after I was sitting and at home and giving my burial instructions. I mean, it passed eventually, but I was seriously scared.
Got it. Is
I mean,
that clear?
And I know people, other people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that clear to you, Edward?
yes, I was going to ask if I could ask a possible clarifying question, which is, when we have individuals that need to regularly get these kinds of shots or regularly have these side effects, how do we ensure, or how do we accommodate for them when they're remote and they are living alone?
Well, put it up as a question.
Yep.
Or use it, if we vote for this one, then we can actually develop the theme on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will develop it if we vote on it.
Perfect. Next one. How can we be more local yet think in a longer term? Clear? Yep, good. Next one. Would public transportation ever figure out how to adjust to give us more space and safety? No, that looks like everybody's all right with that. Is Agile now in its Tony Robbins phase? Ooh,
Somebody define Tony Robbins' phase.
Yeah, Olaf, you need some explanation on that. So who put that up, and can they give in one breath an expansion on it?
It's a long breath.
Breathe, deep breath, David.
Okay, I've been to a bunch of these meetups and sort of look at some of those classes, and the people to me are beginning to get all made up, beginning to sell Agile, and I mean sell it, and it's kind of making me sick. And the reason is because when I see the Tony, he's an expert speaker. That's what he does. He gives you life, right? Very exciting, but there's a complete emptiness to it. I was on one the other day with this female speaker, and I just looked at her and I just wanted to go. She all makeup. She was doing business agility. Nothing new, absolutely nothing.
Got it. Okay, Olaf, did that answer your question? Good. Let's do it like that. When your question is answered, put a thumbs up. Whoever's talking can go, good, got it, and move on. Otherwise, got it? Brilliant.
Got it.
All right, next one. In an online world, what does community mean? And because it's been squished together with it, as online becomes more accessible, how will we choose to connect? That looks like we're all clear with that. Good. How will we adapt to virtual businesses? Now look. Edward,
So for me, I wrote that. So I'm kind of projecting out. Like, we kind of have a little bit now, but it's going to be where virtual business, where there is no headquarters, there is no home base.
Good, you got it. Next one.
It was, are we interacting with those virtual businesses, or are we in those virtual businesses?
Yes, as coaches, as Agile coaches, as any kind of coach, as a business people.
All right, I'm moving on. Next one. Do people and/or organizations really want help, or as coaches, we impose ourselves to resolve problems they don't see?
That's a good one.
Good. Next one. If we don't go to the office for a considerable time, stop moving it around.
Sorry.
Would prices for clothes, jewelry, shoes, etc. go up or down? Yeah, that looks good. Everybody's clear on that. Yeah, I like that one. Wouldn't it be great if empty spaces were taxed? Don't get me started. Oh. Anybody unclear? No, good. What did we like about the pandemic, and what would continue? Okay, good. What does empathy look like moving forward? Yeah, we're all clear. Good. Oh, no, Edward, you want to know? And Galina, they'd like expansion on that. Whose was that?
That was mine.
Say a little more.
So from my personal experience working with remote teams and working with people in the office, I noticed that special accommodations need to be taken when things move online that aren't so kind of ever present as they are in person. And as such, kind of learning about others and empathizing with others tends to take a different form.
Does that explain it for you, Galina? Edward, thumbs up if it does. Good. Next Next, will being in person end up as a competitive advantage? Oh, that's a good crystal ball question, isn't it? Excellent. Next one. Once we go to offices to some degree, in my humble opinion, we'll be sending IMs, internet messages, to a person sitting next to us. Okay. Anybody
What's the
need
difference between now and
Sorry.
sorry.
Yes, exactly.
You do that anyway.
Yeah, me sitting beside my wife, sending each other messages on our phones. Yeah, good. All right, next one. What will happen with commercial real estate rent in desired locations? Also,
Or
don't get me
real estate
started.
in general, right? Home prices. Yeah.
Yeah, homelessness.
That
Anyone?
ties actually a little into my tax one.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Shall we move those close together?
Yeah, not too close.
You're all right.
Yeah.
About there. Is that all right? Not feeling too uncomfortable, invading your personal space too much? No, good.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
All right, down to the next row. How could you keep others safe and loved at work?
Is that a little bit like the empathy one?
Oh,
I
could
would say
be.
so.
Mhm.
Well, except for the empathy one sounds more like what accommodations do we make for people?
Well, you can make accommodations for people you want to love in a certain way, right? So
Yeah.
that seems to be
Yeah.
very close.
Now, I put that one in. I would be happy to chunk it up to a more general question about post-pandemic. How do we care for people's needs?
Yeah.
Shane, does that feel like an overlap with you?
That's cool by me.
Yeah, good. We might actually squish
So
those
does
two
that
together.
relate to the one underneath it then as well?
Under
Let's-
business, yeah,
Hi.
totally.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hello. My arrows have gone bonkers. Move the arrow.
Yeah.
In fact, those three kind of go together. All right, so we've got a cluster there. I'm just going to move these down a little bit and spread them out so that we get to them. Right, good. For those of us working with remote teams in India, what can we do for them? No, that's clear.
Who needs them anymore?
Oh, I'll tell you, if we come to that one, I've got a story that made me weep. But we'll come to that.
I have a few stories too.
Things never return to normal. There will be new normal. What is it? And somebody's just snuck an arrow into the one beside it. Will this impact normal, or will we return to pre-pandemic normal? Yeah, that's all the same kind of question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anybody got a counter offer or need clarification? No, I think that's all one. I'm actually going to stack them so that we just vote on what's on top.
Get the arrow.
Yeah, fine. Next one. Can one of us buy an island for all of us to live in and work from home from? If anybody can organize that, I'm in. All right.
What if you have COVID?
Well, I don't. Right.
I
If I did, then we'd all die horribly.
We'll stick you on that island over there, right?
Right. And lastly, what's the impact on education?
Who needs it?
Yeah, massively overrated. Yeah. So we have, gosh, this is going to be a tough one to slim down. But how many questions we have?
19.
19. So if we call that,
What is it?
am I being over generous to give us 5 votes each? What do you think, Wei?
was going to say 4, but
4? 4.
rounds.
Okay. So how this is going to work, I'm going to fire up a voting session. And I can say how many votes we get. I'm doing it right now.
And then
and-
you'll be able to click directly on the ones you want to vote on.
Yep. So where we've got a stack, make sure you just click on the one on top.
And-
Don't click on the background because that will work as a vote as well. Don't click on headings. That works as a vote.
Yeah.
Just on the sticky, right?
And don't move stickies.
And don't move stickies. Behave yourselves or it'll be such trouble. You have to go to your room.
And if you need to
Well,
remove
the problem with that one is that one with me and I'm sorry who it was, but that really should go together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Can you drag those together while I'm getting this set up?
Yeah.
And as soon as everybody's done their votes, you can put all 4 on one thing. You can distribute them. Totally up to you. But as soon as they've all gone, we'll move on.
And
And
feel
I'm gonna
free to, if you really love one topic, you can add more
Pile
votes
it in.
to the topic if you'd like.
And all of us know that you can cheat and wait till the end, but don't. All right. All right. We're getting started. Voting is underway.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Very good. About half of us are finished. Couple more votes for a couple of people. Two more people have one vote left. Last vote.
Oh, I wanted to add another one.
Ah,
I was thinking about medicine.
oh well, we can, maybe you can see if you can sneak that in sideways. Okay, I think that's us. And end voting session. Can you all see the screen where it's got it all listed now? So our number one, what did we like about the pandemic? Very good. Okay, what will end up being? Yep. Good. Now let's see. I can't remember. Oh, wait. Can you remember if I close this? Will the votes? Can we sort it?
So let's go ahead and start on the first one. I'll move it to the to do. I'll put it in order.
Good. I'm going to leave this open for me. You do that. Then the next one. Then the next two that got 4. Put the two that got 4 side by side, and then we'll do a thumb vote if we get to them.
3.
Is
Let's go
Agile
ahead
now
and get
Tony
started on
Robbins?
the first one while I do this.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to close down at my end. Oh, it does stay there. It's very good. Good. It's been a while since I've done a vote, and they've made it apparently a bit easier. So I'm going to move that one into doing. And no, I don't want voting. I want a timer, please. And exactly as we created it, we're going to go in 5-minute increments. So remind me, who was it who proposed the topic? What did we like about the pandemic? That's Val. So Val, you can kick us off. You don't have to do everything, but you can get the conversation started. And I'm going to start.
I could do the timer. I got OBS going. Let me dig that out.
Oh, have you got the fancy timer?
I got the fancy timer.
Whoa. Do you want me to give you screen share or have you got it?
No, yeah, I don't need screen share. You can just see it on my video.
Okay.
Been looking for an excuse to do this.
If your timer is anything like your current video feed, we're not going to see it.
Yeah. Well, let us know when it goes up so that we know if we're supposed to see it or not. All right.
5 minutes. 1 second. Go ahead and start.
All right. Okay. So that's 5 minutes started. Right, Val, over to you.
Okay, so yeah, despite all the horrible things that have happened during the pandemic, nothing is completely and absolutely horrible. So there must be some positive aspects of it. Also in the positive intelligence program that I'm currently undergoing, one of the things is that when you think something's bad, to turn it around and think about like what gift could this give you. And so I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Awesome. Edward.
I'm just going to speak from my own experience. I'm in a very fortunate situation. I'm not in a situation that a lot of other people have when they're working, so I fully acknowledge that. But that I was able to choose the times and spaces where I would be working and recognize when I was exhausted and, for example, needed to take a nap in the middle of the day. Or I could be able to plan around that, or I wanted to be doing exercises, or I wanted to have the freedom to be in the house. That's not necessarily part of pandemic. That's just a part of looking at remote spaces. Mm-hmm. But it did allow for a freedom where we were not constantly being observed. And that level of not being constantly observed for me was a benefit, even if it was not for others.
Cool. Has anyone got anything different or opposite to that? Now, don't all talk at once.
I think for me, it's been interesting. I mean, at the beginning, I used to get stir crazy being at home. But after a while, and then especially the first staycation, was like disappointed with not getting out.
Shane,
And
I saw you Twitch as well. Oh, sorry,
yeah, no, I was saying just to finish was that the last time I took vacation, it was interesting where I deliberately changed my habits. I changed how I behaved at home. I didn't read like social media and stuff the same way. I chose to completely disconnect. And it's got me really rethink how I approach my life in a more deliberate manner. Right. One is about disrupting myself deliberately, because a lot of times we'll go on vacation and you come back home to the same shitstorm you left and you snap right back into the old behaviors.
Right.
Right. And it's really got me thinking differently now about that.
Yeah, got
Because
that.
my last vacation, I did feel a bit restored, dare I say, even though it was 9 days at home.
Yeah. Shane, did I see you wave?
Yeah. So two things. The obvious is that online meetups, they're great. I hope they stick around.
Right behind you there, mate. Yep.
Especially as someone who is just, in a different country. So this has been a world of accessibility for me, and that's been great. But then the other thing is also just kind of a little bit more intentional design of our home spaces. I know I'm probably not the only one who's kind of given more thought to the spaces that we call home and the kinds of things that we do there and how the spaces can support our activities, things of that nature.
Got it. David.
Yeah, Shane, you just reminded me, because my son stayed at home, I created the back room for his birthday. Not birthday, for his bedroom, sorry. And it was actually a Christmas present, but originally it was going to be my den because he's here. But having done that, the other room that he was originally in, which was my office, if you ever saw a cage around me, it was actually his bunk bed. And the thing that's sort of got me at this point is now, okay, what am I using this room for? So I'm using it for a new office, and I'm actually building it out right now, but it's also going to be, our space is going to be that living space. So it's given me time to think where things can be, kind of the puzzle of my home, where do I separate from work and myself? On the other side, learning, just cooking at home, it has been wonderful. I mean, I'm not the greatest cook, but I'm definitely compared to a lot of those restaurants out there, and I really enjoyed that. And same with my son. So that's kind of what I got out of it.
Right, quick vote. Thumbs up if you want another 5 minutes. Sideways if you just don't care. Down if you do not. 3, 2, 1. What am I seeing? I'm seeing a slight majority. I'm seeing a majority of thumbs up. Right, very good. I don't know about you guys. One of the things that I've noticed is that as we come out of the pandemic, we've started going places. And my immediate experience is, well, this is taking a lot of time. I'm having to drive to places. I could be at home lounging around on the sofa. I could be doing something that actually matters to me. And it's for me, it's certainly driven my feeling like, well, I like this online life. And if I want personal connection, I think I want it to be very much more local, which is tricky because our part of the world is not organized for that. But, Saturday morning, we went down to the farmer's market, which is only a 5-minute drive away. That felt like about as far as I really wanted to go. To go to the Buffalo, that was an hour and a quarter's drive, and it was worth it, but I'm never going to commute again. I am not commuting again. So that's been something that's really, wow. The actual experience of going outside seems like it's a huge waste of time. And +1 to doing things at home. I've started doing gardening. Me, a gardener? Good Lord. I've actually started doing that and, starting to think about, well, maybe I actually need to sell my car and get a truck because I want to do a lot of work around the house, and I could use a truck to go and pick stuff up for that, pick it up locally. Anyone else? Anyone we've not heard from? Yes, Galina, perfect.
I mean, it goes with what Shane said, that we that we rethink our spaces, our houses. I can see so much more home updates, home repairs, upgrades. Everywhere you go, people have an opportunity to call a contractor to improve their houses. What did we do? What have we done, each of us, with time that we are not on a train or in traffic? At first, we were actually working, but mostly it went into cooking and exercising more regularly, which is good. That these two, I think the question was phrased, what do we want to keep? I don't want to go back to spending so much time on a commute.
I'm seeing sort of some general head nodding.
Yeah,
David, again?
I've been actually, I have not been restraining myself like Andrew. I've been going around. I flew to East Coast twice during the pandemic. I've been seeing people and dealing with little ones that go to the daycare. So I've been around people exposed continuously. Seems to be all right so far.
Cross fingers,
Okay.
yep.
Next.
David, I saw you twitch again. And John, I saw you grinning, but I don't know whether that was a call for attention.
I think Olaf had his hand up. No?
Oh, did you? Oh, I keep missing you, Olaf. You're tucked away in the corner
I'm
there.
far away, far away.
Yes, right.
So I think you all mentioned training already. Is that right? So I have a stack of notes like this thick from training that I was able to take in this almost year and a half of pandemic. Not quite year and a half yet. So that's one thing I would like to be able to continue doing, remote stuff where I don't have to pay for a flight and hotel just to be with a couple of people to learn new stuff.
Yeah, I'd actually +1 on the training thing, because that's one of the things I'm thinking about, is actually going, for the rest of this year, I'm going to dump everything in my head into video training. I'm actually looking at taking a course on the way to do that and have it be premium training. So it's a couple $100, not $15 on Udemy, you know. Anyone else?
Yeah, response to you and to Galina, prior to the pandemic, I always had a 30-minute commute. Wouldn't go past 30 minutes. And so along the same lines, I don't like commuting, never did, never will. However, on the other side, to Olaf's side, is that I do actually like going to other countries. So that would be the one commute I would definitely love to continue.
Hey, no one said the obvious. Stock market. What do I want to keep? Stock market.
Ooh.
It won't go. We all understand it. It's not forever, but
yeah.
All right. Time's up.
Time's up. Ready for another vote for another 5 minutes? Same rules. 3, 2, 1. Looks like we've worn that one out.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Let's go ahead and move that out the way.
Timer.
Will being in person end up as competitive advantage? I've actually just got to step away for a second.
I'll start.
Wait, do you mind?
Yeah, I got it. So this came about in a LinkedIn post from Damon Poole. If you know, he asked the question like, "Everybody's remote now. Are you going to miss anything?" Like, you know.
Wait, could you get closer to your mic, please?
All right. You know, there was a question posed by Damon Poole on LinkedIn, and he was asking the question, is like, is there anything you miss, or pre-pandemic, what you know, you all prefer remote, you know, is there anything that you saw as an advantage? And I came up, I actually thought about it carefully, and I said, like, wait a minute, there is an advantage here. But before I give my answer, I want to throw that out there and see, cast a net and see what people think. I mean, do you think, because everybody's going to move to, everybody's going to has and will be moving to a more remote place. You see it all the time. But at the same time, it's sort of like, will it be a competitive advantage that I can communicate faster? And what are your thoughts on that, Galina?
I was working with a lot of remote participants. We all do with outsource and with the time zones and not. We all know that definitely being in the room with a large that conversation goes better. But there are good communicators and there are not so good communicators. A lot of remote folks have been able to have very nice community around them and their voices to be counted and everything. So it's all in our personal communication, I think.
Good point.
Yeah, I've learned quite a bit about my own communication style as we moved to remote because of the aspect of a lot of the teams that I've worked with refused to have their cameras on. And so finding ways to be very clear, but not presuming emotions and not presuming activity, not presuming or projecting what someone has in addition to it, and just taking the information and the content, has been not necessarily a positive experience, but it's also allowed me to be able to understand my own messaging and how I'm able to communicate things. And then also there is the unforeseen benefit that if I'm on a call with someone and they are berating me, you can mute that person. Not as like being a jerk, but literally like if my fight or flight reflexes are triggered and I can't respond to this person in an accurate way, I can mute this person. I can be able to take a second to calm down and then unmute, and they're still going to be yelling at me, but I'm not going to lose any information in that conversation. So I can still be able to pick out the space where they are communicating. So much like how, I'm sorry, this is the last thing I'll say here, but much like how when I was doing support and I was doing phone calls, you're a captive audience. And that has a very different power dynamic. And that captive audience communicates also to a boss subordinate dynamic when you are in person, which you have a lot more control over when you're remote.
Someone else? Thank you, Ed. Shane.
Yeah, sure. I have a somewhat disappointed answer, but in my experience, the opposite of a good idea is usually a good idea. And as we start to have things that are more digital and a greater need for that, I think that some people will have an opposite reaction, have a stronger need for things that are in person. And it creates diverse markets that way.
David?
Do you need people in order to get that advantage? Meaning that if you're down at some office somewhere and everyone else is remote, doesn't seem to be a competitive advantage. I mean, you may be working with a few people, but if the company has gone virtual, I can't wait till you explain it, but I just don't see that. Pavi was next.
In 5 seconds.
I'll keep going.
I think in terms of competitive advantage of being in person, while you vote, should I just complete my thought?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
I think we just had an insta vote. Another 5 minutes. Keep going, Pavit.
Yeah.
I think relationship building or connection, I feel like is easier or more natural in person. There is, no matter how much I literally love that we're at home and I don't have to travel into work and, waste all this time, and I'm getting to be more productive, I still feel that in-person interactions help us get deeper connections, form relationships, even at work. We don't realize that those are important. Right now, it's become a little too mechanical.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I mean, my answer to that original question was, what did you miss? What did I miss? And that's kind of what where I would take it to the nth degree with what Pavel was saying, was sort of like, I missed the ability to interrupt a leader. I missed the ability to jump in front of him and just kind of like, he's walking to this office and I am literally stalking him, and I need him to make a decision. So I wait until he is about to go sit down at his desk. I step up and I just interrupt whatever he's talking to, whoever he's talking to. And I say, hey, I need your help. These teams are stuck. We need a decision. And we need to know now, because I can't interrupt anybody like I can from home, like I could when I was in the office.
Yeah.
And so it harkens back to the day when I was still a software developer and I'm working in a war room. We're all packed into the same room, sitting side by side. If I needed a decision made, I need to consult anybody, or just turn to my friend and say, like, how does this work? Tell me, what's the answer to this? They would just yell it back to me.
Yeah.
Like constantly integrated in that way and working like it was not a cup of tea for everybody, but I miss that. And that's why I'm wondering now is like, yeah, working from home is convenient. But what if it's a competitive advantage for a small startup to be all co-located?
Yeah.
Right.
That's all. One of the things that us Agile coaches end up learning is that open space, open plan offices are the stupidest idea ever, because it just means everybody interrupts everybody unintentionally. They all go onto headphones and everybody's back to working on their own. If you want people to actually work together, you put them in a room together so the interruption is part of the flow of work. And there's the classic Morabian thing from the 70s, from the book, whatever his name was, Morabian wrote in the 70s, of whatever it was, 13, 38, 55, or whatever the numbers are. That doesn't add up. 7, 38, 55. 7% of meaning comes from the written word, 38 from the spoken word, and 55 from body language. I have no idea if anybody's doing the research now to see if that's shifted, but no question that, I mean, there's an exercise that I've given people before now where I showed them the sentence, I never said she was late to the meeting. And I asked them, what do they think it means? And then I have fun going, I never said she was late to the meeting. I never said she was late to the meeting. I never said she was late to the meeting. I never said she was late to the meeting. I never said she was late to the meeting. Which one is it? So, I mean, if we lose that when it's just written by sending somebody a text or something, what are we losing in person? Right? Olaf can't see we at the moment for some weird Zoom reason, Edward, I see you waving.
I mean, coming from a generation that was using IRC chat and everything else, you work out ways to be able to articulate emphasis when you're communicating and in chat. I'm not saying that that's a solution. I mean, that is something where you have to learn it, and it's a separate semantic and syntax learning. And I think Val's about to contradict me possibly. But just in my upbringing, that's been the solution that we found for that worked quite well.
Yeah.
But it also means that everything's much more constructed.
All right, flash vote. 3, 2, 1. Right.
Oh, we're gonna keep going.
I want to hear Val's point.
Yep, Val, you're up.
Yeah, like Edward was saying, I think it's possible to communicate certain things via text. I think even in person, you can still miscommunicate. there's some things that I think is hard in a larger group to make social. For instance, at my club, we're now in a virtual room, and you can't tell the kids, well, go look at your neighbor's screen or computer now. You have to go through this gyration of sharing screens, and they have to be willing to do so now, because you can't sort of reach into the computer and say, hey, go do that. So it's one drawback. But on the other hand, and I think it does, to some point, depend on the maturation of your communication skills. I also find that the opposite of Lee's point of being able to walk in and interrupt, that being remote, if you use that, you can actually use it to give yourself that pause. You can use it to, kind of have a chance to think and gauge your response. And, you can always pretend, well, I was on mute while you're thinking of what you're going to say, or trying to, kind of get your emotions under control, or whatever it is. Not only that, but while you're thinking, you turn your video off. Those expressions that you might have spontaneously that, might give you away, you now can kind of wait for your more logical, less emotional response to come through. And in some ways, I think you can actually, kind of adjust your response. And I've actually used it that way, not being on video. When my boss was having a bad day and decided that she was going to blame me for a bunch of stuff. And I went, I didn't have my video on. I remained quiet, and I didn't say anything for a little bit, for a beat. And then she said, well, what do you think of that? And I paused and I said, well, thank you for the constructive feedback. And right now I'm really thinking about how I can make that information useful. And I left it at that, and she had to, jump off. And she actually texted me later that night after she had a chance to think about it. Now, if I had just responded or given some facial expression that might have escalated it or made her feel defensive or something, I don't think that would have happened. So in some way, I think we can use that to give us space.
Olaf, you slightly beat Shane to it.
Yes, there may be some advantages to being in an offline video connected world. But give us another 10,000 generations before we actually know what to do with that. I think there's, until that happens, a huge, huge competitive advantage to being together in person. And that's not going to go away for another 10,000 generations if we survive that long as a species.
Yeah.
If Dave Chilcott was here, he'd tell us that we weren't going to, but yes, yep.
Oh, there will be a few of us that do, but
yeah,
that will be because we figure out how to do things in person together.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got air on the moon now, oxygen on the moon.
Shane, then Edward.
So I realized what was unsatisfying about my first answer, which is that lacked my perspective. Rather than either or, I realized that I need both. And I really love being able to stand next to someone, peek over their shoulder, learn from them directly, in a way that isn't necessarily me just blowing up their Slack. And at the same time, I love being able to be anywhere in the world, connecting with the best minds available, being able to get paid from an airplane. And I think that as one starts to become missing, I really start to miss the other. And just one last point, if I may, which is that a lot of people living in rural areas have been able to thrive a little bit more. And that's something that has been super cool, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, vote again real quick, folks. Well, we're going to keep going.
All right. So it's over to you, Edward, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to also say, and this kind of dovetails a little into the empathy conversation for people, but speaking as someone that is neurodivergent, if not autistic, I mean, somewhere on that autistic spectrum, the ability, or it is interesting to see people experience what happens when you have that visual response removed. Because if you don't know me in person, and I think, oh, Andrew, you've seen me in two different ways. You've seen me when I present,
Yep.
or when I'm masking, and then you've seen me when I've been completely by myself. And when I'm completely by myself, this is about as much emotion as you're getting from me.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. And so it's been really informative about what we can do, not only to be able to make accommodations for remote physically, but also how we communicate and the expectations that we have. And I've found that really empowering, and also kind of, there's a fear there of when you go back to work, you are going to have expectations just put back on you if everything goes back to normal. Where it is extremely exhausting to interpret and guess at what people want to see to be able to understand the emotion that's supposed to be communicated, rather than what I am actively trying to communicate. And so there's an empowering piece to this.
Yeah. Just to add flavor to that, my wife has face blindness. And so she usually relies upon how somebody moves until they open their mouth and speak to her. So working online, it's like she hasn't got a clue who you are until you say something, which has been really interesting for her because she works as a tutor. And so she's sometimes got 20, 25 kids on, but many of those don't turn their cameras on. So it's been an interesting old juggling match. I think there's a lot more to dig into, and I don't quite know where to go with it, around the impact of this Zoom COVID era and neurodivergence, neurodiversity. Yeah.
I think just to kind of dovetail on that, and this kind of goes with what's empathy going to look like, right? Because the idea of, I would say we do have neurobiology happening right here in this call, like straight through the call, straight through the camera. But I wonder if we are losing all one of the things people forget is there's hormonal cues, right? Too, that we don't even consider, sense of smell, being around somebody else. And then the other side that it's making me think is sort of like the oxytocin you hit by being around with somebody else and feeling warm and fuzzy. When I think back about this past year, it can be deep when it really makes it there, but I think I get it if everybody is empathetic, but it's sort of like you're not touched as easily in a way, right? Going back to what Pavitt was talking about.
Yeah. Well, you get why I told the story about the baby buffalo.
Exactly. Like I can watch a YouTube somebody brushing a baby buffalo, or I could be in the pen with it.
Yeah.
It's no comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, experiencing things is completely different. Being immersed in the situation than just watching it on the screen, right?
It makes me wonder if even virtual reality, let's say we were all in a virtual space, would it still be the same? My thinking is probably not. It wouldn't be terribly that much different.
So I'll look first.
Go ahead.
I also heard David, but I'm just going to, what about the movies? That's all I will say.
A great example. Yeah. Ed?
Oh, if you heard David first, I want David to have a chance to.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, I was going to say, some of the options that I've seen that have been put forward, Topia is a huge example of that. And I mentioned this previously. It's a space where you can walk around in a virtual space, and as you get closer to someone, their video camera actually pops on.
Mhm.
See their audio, or their audio is relative to how far away you are from them. And maybe it's just what my expectations are, or maybe it is something that's really effective. But it does generate that ability to be able to walk up to a conversation or walk away from a conversation, and creates a similar even dopamine hit. And also the ability to just say, like, okay, I've had enough of this, and to walk away and have that freedom to do so, as opposed to being in Zoom where you're constantly looking. Or what's the most ridiculous thing to have for virtual Zoom? They're like going to put them all in a chat, like in a room space, and have them like just their heads are bobbing. Or what the most recent telepresence options that they're looking at there. Yeah, there are options that incorporate the ability to withdraw or approach. And that by itself is really powerful in this remote meeting space.
All right, there goes that time box. Shall we vote again?
3, 2, 1.
All right, I think we are moving on.
I think I averaged out. Yeah. So we have 2 equal. So quick show of hands for who wants to go to what does empathy look like moving forward? 3, 2, 1. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4 who would like to. And a quick show of hands for how can we be more local yet thinking longer term? 3, 2, 1. I see 2-ish. I think that what does empathy look like moving forward actually gets a slight win. Do you want to drag that over there?
Got it.
And on your mark, let's hit 5 minutes. Oh, by the way, just so that we can do a check-in, it is 10 to the top of the hour. Nominally, we stop at the top of the hour, but we always end up hanging around for at least half an hour afterwards for the sidewalk conversation. That's how I'm planning on doing it tonight. If our conversations continue past the top of the hour, so be it. So who was it put up? What does empathy look like moving forward?
I think it was me. It's been a while.
Well, kick it off anyhow, Shane. Over to you.
Well, shit. I just put up questions I don't have the answer to. Let's see. So the problem that I'm struggling with is, I don't know. I'm generally not someone who's quick to speak, and when it comes to working in person, it's a lot more easy to kind of navigate my way into that space. But when I'm on a Slack call, I'm super confident, just like letting myself fade into the background and then not making those connections. And then next thing I know, I don't really know anything about my coworkers or what they're working on. Well, probably more about what they're working on than who they are. And especially as, you know, people don't want to turn on their cameras, or they don't really like to communicate even when you ask them to several times in Jira. It does become this sort of detached experience for me. I don't know what to do with it.
Val. And then David.
In some way, I've kind of had the opposite experience. Kind of being more introverted in person. If I don't know a person that well, I may not approach them as readily. Whereas if it's like online, it doesn't seem so bad to just say, hey, call them up. It just doesn't seem so, I don't know if it's intimidating or whatever it is that causes me to be a bit more reticent. I've actually made more connections since the pandemic started than before. And I don't just mean, hey, connect them on LinkedIn or something, number-wise. I mean, actual deep conversations with people from all over the world. And so I've actually made more friends or sort of associates that way. I think people are more accepting in some way, because we're all sort of at home and relaxed. And now it's not so much about what your hair looks like or what you're wearing, or, and it becomes more about what you're saying and the conversation and the content of the conversation. And like they were saying, I read online or saw a headline somewhere where, online dating sites exploded, but with nowhere to go, people were spending more time actually speaking to one another. And when everybody was quarantined, people had more time to meet people online, right? Whereas before it's like, oh, I don't know, I'm trying to coordinate. If you were trying to catch somebody, they might be out doing something, where everybody's at home and people wanted connection and everything. So they seem to be more available to say, hey, let's, schedule some time on a Saturday or something when maybe they wouldn't have been home. Things like that. With my mom, who's in a different state, once we got over the electronic hurdle of trying to connect with her and get her familiar, I find now that, like images, sending her gifts or something, it is much more frequent now. So in a way, she actually has more contact with all of us in the family. With the pandemic, I think we all have, for the first time in history, I would venture, a shared experience globally. We all know what it's like to stay home. We all know what it's what it's like to worry about COVID or have, loved ones taken away or something. We all have this global shared experience that we can all now, in a way, connect on. And that connection provides sort of more immediate empathy. Like you look at what's going on in India. If we hadn't had that experience ourselves, if we had not experienced COVID numbers to the extent that we do in the US, and somebody said, oh, look at India, they're being ravaged by something, would we empathize as much? Not having that shared experience to work from to help motivate that empathy.
You got me thinking about, I think it was Dan Goleman's definition or expansion on empathy inside the whole positive psychology thing, that there's cognitive empathy where you know that somebody else is experiencing an emotion. There's emotional empathy where you share the experience with them. You actually have that feeling. And then there's compassion, which is taking action out of that empathy. And it's a very interesting way into understanding sociopathy and psychopathy. People who know that you're having an experience but decide to exploit it as opposed to share it. So I think your point that we've all had this shared experience is a very rich one. I'm seeing almost equal waving. I didn't see who was first, but then we and Olaf. So you guys duke it out.
First, we're going to.
David was next.
Oh, was it David? Oh, I beg your pardon, mate. There you go. Over to you.
The one thing I just connect with is psychological safety. This is what I was thinking even the previous subject, is the connection between Valley, I think, actually it was Shane, I can take a breath, right? And Valley, I think you said something along times, I don't need to. I can check my feelings, right? And then I can sort of take a deep breath and then start the conversation. Also, I was thinking physical safety, given all the crime against women, children, what have you, it seems like it's potentially a good thing in that sphere as well. So that's just what I wanted to say, is those two areas. Next.
I think it was Olaf.
Were you going to do a vote,
We just kept going because I think everybody.
It was rolling, wasn't it? Anybody massively counter to us continue to talk about this?
Yeah, I wanted to keep going anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure that the way that we display empathy changes all that much. I think if we have the skill, we can continue to use it. If we don't, then, well, maybe we need to learn.
Yeah. I don't know if you yeah, okay, so you muted yourself. Yeah, that was my kind of like where I was going. I think in the beginning I wasn't sure. I had pretty comfortable with doing remote facilitation and remote coaching to some degree, but I hadn't gotten comfortable to like holding silence or like doing a training and people weren't responding and it was just everybody's camera was off, everybody was muted. It used to bother me in the beginning, but after a while, I kind of tap into that sense of what Val was saying. It's like, hey, they just want their safety. Just give it to them. Stop asking them to turn their camera on, right? And after a while, it stopped bothering me, and it was fine. I conduct many trainings like that. It doesn't bother me at all. And what was interesting was sort of like, and I very much appreciate John. Sorry to single you out, John, but you know, John is actually from my Alethea cohort. And what was interesting was sort of like going through a coaching program with him and many others. And even before that, in my own private coaching with my coaches, we were bearing lots of personal things to each other. And it was to the point where I remember distinctly, like in practicing with some of our classmates, John, or like working with one of my coaches, there was virtually no, to some extent, to even like argue against my own earlier point, was in those kind of situations, we were able to transcend the space. We were transcend the distance. And it was almost like they're in the room with me.
Mhm.
So that's been kind of eye-opening, that in some senses, there's no difference. I just wonder what people thought about that. Unmute yourself, Pavitt.
No, David, and then me.
Oh, okay. Empathy is a lot easier when it's one-on-one. Just winding down from this gig, and I had one-on-ones with 40 people and built a very close, trusting relationship, which is really nice. But what you're saying, you know, when you have a full, you have a session with many people, half of them do want to shut down. So, you know, I try and bring them into it. You try and have those little engagements and those kind of agreements, if you like, to bring them in. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think we all feel that and get kind of used to it, that there's a blank screen and there's someone behind that blank screen. I'm still not used to that because I like people talking and giving their 2 cents. So that was my 2 cents. Avit.
Did I see Galena move her hand?
At some point, when someone was talking, I said, yeah, we can make it work with group and have them communicate nicer to each other, but come on, it's incredibly lonely that when you don't see actually people, when you cannot randomly walk up to someone and start talking and maybe do this again and see if you can become a friend, instead of invading their online space and they're busy with something. Come on, it's much more difficult.
I think it's time for another vote.
Oh, okay.
Pavitt were you going to say something, Pavitt, weren't you?
Let's vote real quick. 3, 2, 1. All right, one more
Feels
round.
like there's a bit of a stack. Yep.
I think I was just gonna say, oh, sorry, was somebody else going?
It's you.
No, it's you.
I was just gonna say, I think empathy, or probably anything else that we spoke about before this too, it really does come from individual intent. So like, if I want to connect with all of you, I can choose to be present. But if I want to be disengaged, it's totally my call, right? And that's something on the lines of what some of you have already spoken of, like Olive was mentioning, like empathy stays. Like if you know how to be empathetic, you can be empathetic virtually or physically. So at the end of the day, it comes to your own individual intent. I think Andrew was going to say something.
That's right. Actually, yes, I am. I am going to say something. Slightly backing up a little bit. Having watched my wife work, where she's done a lot more group work than I have over this last year online. I mean, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, 4 or 5 times a day, 20 or 30 people online, but they're kids. And they're at home and they've got dogs and pesky little brothers and their parents playing piano in the background or hovering and listening to them. So they often have their video and their sound off. And initially, my wife was wrestling with, should I set a sort of policy around this? But what she realized was that it was evolutionary. The kids that were engaged were engaged. And they were the ones asking questions. They were the ones in chat and they were the ones involved. So after a while, she was like, no, you know what? It actually doesn't matter. I'm here for the ones who are here for me. I was like, oh, yeah, good. Got it.
Val, then Olaf.
No, I think it's
And
Olaf
then
first.
Edward, then John.
All right, Val, I will go first then. So I think one of the things about empathy is that it pays itself back to the person who is giving empathy. And so just by going first and expressing empathy for others, you're actually getting all the benefits of it. So if you're looking for it, try and give it first.
Val.
Not to diminish anyone's experience, but I was just thinking that how we experience it, our individual felt sense of it, probably has more to do with ourselves than the other people. You know, if we feel uncomfortable because everyone's got their screens off, I mean, maybe it's a sort of a reflection upon, you know, what does that mean about how we interact and what we need from our interactions. I remember once, probably a couple of years ago, when I was looking for a job and I interviewed with Workday. And they had their trainers who work from home full time. This was pre-pandemic. So this is the way it was set up. And they would teach like 6 to 8 hours a day online. And they had a policy that you could not ask people to turn on their video. And you could not call on people to respond. So the whole time you're there just giving training and content, and that was the way they had set it up. So it's interesting then that, you know, they didn't want to force their clientele to respond. So that was interesting, I thought, and I have had, like I said, you know, to Pavit's point about intent, you know, very empathetic, emotional conversations without any video at all. So, you know, I really think it goes back to the individual person.
Edward was up next, then John, then I wanted to chip in if it's still relevant.
First, thumbs up, thumbs down, I suppose.
Oh, 3, 2, 1. That looks like carry on. Yep, good.
Carry on.
Going to talking about classrooms and large sized classrooms and being there, what's evolutionary, there's a really interesting point where when you get beyond a classroom of a certain size, how much of what someone's interacting with is parasocial versus actively being coached or guided or working with the individual that's presenting. Because when, I mean, I think that what you just said, Andrew, about what your wife was doing regarding it being evolutionary and those that contribute will contribute is a lot of what we do with job hackers to be able to put forward in the messaging and everything else. I used to, for the first 2 years, would actively put out questions there, would reach out to people, would message them, would directly try and be able to get correspondence and be able to get people engaged. And the energy that took from me made it was not possible.
Hmm.
And for a little bit of time after that, I had to look at myself and say, well, am I being a good facilitator if I'm not facilitating conversation? If people are sitting listening to these presentations without contributing in the chat or something similar, if the chat is quiet today, is that a failing on my part that I was not able to elicit additional conversation outside of the presentation material that we were given?
Okay.
And I don't know if I have an answer to that.
I do, but I see John is in the stack after you, Edward.
Right. I'll hold off there, but that is kind of a question that kind of stands out to you when you are.
Got it.
We live in a rural area in upstate New York, and what we've seen, and with our friends who are doing remote work as well, is that empathy is showing up in the actual community that we live in a lot more. And I was a geography major, and so I think about mental maps and how I conceive of areas. And my mental map where we live is completely changed. And I can't really explain this, or articulate this well, but it's almost that what's happening online, there's this reality outside in the countryside around us that allows me to sort of show up here or in any situation and then actually go out and help like my neighbor with his tractor.
Hmm.
And that wouldn't have happened before. I'm not sure what is happening, but it's a neat new phenomenon that we're seeing in like rural areas. So that's all.
Thank you.
Wow.
Andrew?
I don't know whether to pick up on that thread or go back to my original thought, because that's a really good thread. Just thinking about the whole local thing. I'm going to go back to the original thing though. So to Val's point, one of the classes that I teach is about meetings. And you guys have seen the short version, or some of you have seen the short version of it. Consistently, the biggest waste of time at work is voted in as meetings. Meetings are the biggest waste of time. And it's typically because the meeting itself is either poorly run or what the meeting led to wasn't worth it. And it can be poorly run because it's been poorly prepared by the facilitator. People are unclear on the purpose of the meeting, and so they show up anyhow and they're sitting around wasting their time. One of the ways of addressing that, quite apart from just going, this is what the purpose of this meeting is, you can now decide whether you should attend or not, is to actually request engagement, actually ask for it. And I've witnessed a complete transformation of the relationship of one team to 6 others by a master coach walking them through the difference between attendance and participation. Just extraordinary. But you don't just request engagement, you have to then make space for it. And when people do, acknowledge it and use what they contribute, so it doesn't end up being of no value to them, right? So while on one hand, if people do not wish to have their face on screen, they want to be on mute, that's fine. But I think a lot of it depends on the context for how that session has been set up. If it's just there and that, I think of my wife's kids. A lot of them are there because their parents have paid and they've been told to attend and they don't want to. They've got no interest. Perfect. Let them leave their video off, right?
I'm going to propose we just finish out with this topic. We're not going to have time to go into another one if that's okay.
I think that's reasonable. Anybody massively upset by that?
No,
I need the community. Don't leave.
I mean, I want to kind of, I feel like I can bring it all together because I think what's really, what's bringing up that's really fascinating to see, and I didn't acknowledge it until you guys brought it up, was there's a certain need for connection. that never
Mhm.
happened before, right? There's a need now amongst all of us that we are so isolated that in a way, in the past, we would complain about being in meetings all day, but in a certain way, I think we're secretly, some of us are glad because we know that once work is over, you're on your own, right? And I want to say is like we potentially as um, a sort of species are learning to attune deeper to connection, to deeper to listening, right? We have this fundamental attunement to, to borrow some of that language, is sort of like we're attuning to each other in a way that is nonverbal in a remote fashion. I'm reading, like, for instance, we are probably all learning to read I know I am, but reading body language through the camera and purposely like when I use Zoom, I watch how I behave to somebody because that's part of my body language and how I communicate to somebody. So there's an intention being set there that I'm going to use gestures in a way that only I can make sure you can see it, right? And it's really interesting to watch because I think the other side is those of us, and I kind of went through it too, is sort of like it forces us also to confront our shadow, right? The side of us that feels lonely, that doesn't like to be alone. And in a way, in the past, we have leaned on being in person, that I can just cozy up to somebody and say, hey, what's going on? How's your day going? What do you think of this? And we can take advantage of that. We can't do that anymore. Right now we have to deliberately, I think it was Ed that said, like, I now have to be the one to be the first person to take the first step, to be vulnerable, show vulnerability so that I can model behavior for somebody else. And that is fundamentally different than, I used to do that in person too, but I think now we're all forced to do it in a way, if we want, if you want that type of outcome, basically. And it's got me really thinking about that and what is it to help somebody in that way.
I think sorry, go ahead, Robert. Yeah.
I was going to say, I will say it is absolutely wild, and there's a lot of different ways you can interpret that word when you're met with direct opposition to doing so. When you present yourself openly and honestly, and you're saying, hey, this is actually where this is coming from, and this is where our interactions are, and I'd like to talk about this, and you are completely shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, no, this is not how I work. No, this is not how I want to respond to this. This is not our dynamic, and this is not what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, that's not on me. That's on the other individual.
Yeah.
Isn't that good how that actually points to the need to deliberately form agreement? That, in some communities, they would use the word consent.
Mm-hmm.
If I was spinning up a team, I'd want them to put together a team agreement about how they were going to communicate and when and how they're going to work together. But that's really interesting that what you've basically just pointed out, that we've really amplified the need to make that agreement in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a skill that we should acquire.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Since we're sort of winding up.
Yeah.
So 1/5 of us don't wear glasses on this screen. So I'm going with a prediction that 1/5 of the Western world doesn't wear glasses when they're on Zoom. So just want to give you that.
Good. Well, I don't wear glasses when I'm asleep, because if I do it any other time, I bump into things. Mr. Magoo, right?
I think it's a Zoom thing, right?
Yeah,
Jane and Pavid, I think you two are the ones that don't have glasses on.
That's great. Something that would open a huge can of worms, but I'm going to throw it out in your lap anyhow, is we pointing out how we're juggling with loneliness. And one of the thoughts that I had about that was how it is one of the really interesting ways of pointing out how zoning for North America was deliberately lobbied to create very specific separation of home and work. Very different from the way how Europe evolved without zoning laws. It just evolved that way. And it was deliberate. It was done through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. with the automobile, tire, and gasoline lobby really made sure that zoning was deliberately designed to go, you work over there, light industry there, heavy industry there, and you live over here. So if you happen to live with a partner or a family, you could have probably got through the pandemic without being too lonely. You might have been overwhelmed by your kids. But if you lived alone, you'd suddenly realize that you got your social fix, that mammalian brain fix of the need to be with people. You got it at work.
Yeah.
Huh, who knew? Right?
And the feeling of
yeah.
belonging.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why I made the calculus to immediately start digging in on the nonprofit or doing more work effectively, but it was reaching out to more communities, was because I knew how screwed I was going to be this last year.
Yeah.
I do have a partner here. She is very loving, she is wonderful, but it does not fulfill every aspect that I need in my life.
Yeah, I get that. And it's really interesting how we've adapted, but I think to Olaf's point about the 10,000 generations, whether that adaptation gets passed on as an epigenetic pressure, and if so, how quickly does that show up in our kids and their kids and their kids? We'll have to find out, won't we?
And how fast is it going to wear off?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
The one thing that John had said before about community, and he mentioned that the community was online now, and you got to know what his neighbors potentially did. It's really the same with an earthquake. You know, in San Francisco, we've had a bunch of earthquakes, and suddenly all the neighbors get together, and it's one of the most beautiful things. You know, they come out with the candles and drinks, and they start talking, and you start knowing your neighbors. And I think one of the things I was thinking is about reaching out for help. And that's what it was the thing about the tractor thing that sort of alerted me to that. And suddenly you know what your neighbor, in that moment, you know what your neighbors need and who they are and how you can help them. I just, that really sort of was a poignant parallel for me. So thank you, John.
Yeah. Yeah. That neighborhood thing, my wife's told me to not spend the money on buying a chipper, because there's probably somebody local that I could borrow one from. Right. Huh. Sorry, I didn't hear who it was wanted to say something and I stomped on you.
I saw Pavit step up, so.
Right. Good job. Pavit.
She's back. We're all talking about you, Pavit. Where is she? Where did she go?
Where'd she go? What happened?
I was here. I was grabbing a midnight snack.
Oh, okay, good. Wondered whether you're getting the Wii syndrome of your screen going black to other people, you know.
So, oh my gosh. I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, no pressure, Pavit, but we're all waiting for you to say something important now. You know.
You want your wise words.
No, Edward, were you going to say something?
Very nicely done.
I was going to say something particularly, or potentially, that's the word, not particularly, inflammatory, but just in a sense of crisis and earthquake coming together and seeing the communities and looking to your local, seeing the American political system and seeing how it can be broken. I don't need to talk about who was in power and what the stances are or what those after effects were and how people feel about that, but just that we based our trust on this system that can be twisted towards a particular aim, caused, at least in my case, for our communities to be able to step up and look out for each other a great deal more, because we weren't reliant on the sense that things were going to be okay at the federal level, or that it was going to take care of us, which, at least for my upbringing, and I'm being careful to say my upbringing is from my generation because it's not universal, I felt a great deal of grief when I saw that, and I saw that breakdown, because there was the sense that there were people that were smarter than me that were going to handle things. And seeing, at least from my point of view, how much that was not the case. and how much we had to look out for one another was incredibly, I mean, enlightening, if not a great experience.
That's a really powerful point, because if you think about January 6th, if all those people went through everything that we did, all those people who rioted, they feel the same loneliness, the same need for belonging as we do. And what would have happened if we were not in a pandemic? Would they have responded so violently as they did? You know, was that, it makes me question now, was that a cry for help? It's really interesting to think about in that way.
There's a lot to think about in there. I mean, Galena earlier mentioned the stock market. And you can tie those two things absolutely together when you look at what was probably going on around essentially the media being used to shift the context of society for the benefit of those invested heavily in the stock market, whilst keeping that being their motivation completely out of the view of the people that they were influencing. So we're at 25 minutes past the hour, and I think at past I definitely need to go and get some supper. Pavit, what's watching you chew, Pavit? That's torture, woman. Jeez, starving now.
You're welcome.
There you go. So entirely up to you guys, but if anybody just has something that they got this evening that they wouldn't have got otherwise, just something quick to share, it'll be a lovely way to wrap the evening up. So I'm just going to ask for that. Shane,
Yeah, sure.
and then Edward.
Yep. Sounds good.
I'll go ahead and go first. And essentially, something that Olaf mentioned that I feel like I forgot a long time ago, which is just the power of going first. I feel like sometimes it's really easy for me to, switch to another tab, switch to another task, just whatever that thing is that I don't want to deal with right now. And especially when it comes to connecting with people, I think it is really important to go first. It's something that might not feel intuitive at first, but it's very important. I like to try and cultivate that more. So I just want to say thank you, Olaf.
I'm going to take away John's statement about the humanity seeking balance. How once there's this connection with the online community, there's a further connection to your local community as well for currently unexplained reasons, but that you look to your neighbors more when you can kind of see the online world is really striking. I'm also, for those that weren't on at the time when I posted it, I think most of us were, but I'm just going to paste this again of the what the ask was for Job Hackathon we're working on. We're looking for Scrum Masters that can be able to facilitate Scrum teams of people that are looking for work and that would like the support and also be able to understand being a part of a Scrum team. So I'm going to include that here.
That's really good, because I mean, a Scrum Master is a source and cause of community, and very local community too. So that's really good. Anybody else got something they'd like to share before we wrap it up?
I just found this whole experience so fascinating. Like, this was such a neat and efficient way to communicate and meet and build community. So I have a tremendous amount of gratitude, and I'm kind of fascinated. So thank you very much.
Sure,
Got that.
Really great having you here.
Got that. Thank you for coming. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, John.
I was very aware of your listening. Got that. Well, it seemed wise to me to start a community online, and I would say the thing that I've got is just that. This is one of the places where I most profoundly get my human connection. This is one of the places where I've learned about what it is that I want coming out of this pandemic. I want to thank all of you, new and regulars, for actually coming together to cause this particular space and the flavor of this space. It's fulfilled my intentions and gone way beyond it. +1, absolutely. Very good. So for that, everybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is there anything, any last words?
Sorry.
Sorry.
We're good. We're good. We're good.
We're good?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to go and put heat to pan and put some supper together. We and I will get together and figure out something for this time in 2 weeks' time. I know I threatened to start a book club, and I've done nothing about that so far, but the threat's still there. So, my lovelies, thank you very much for being here this evening. It's been a delight, and I will speak to all of you anon.